Hey everyone, how's it going? Matthew Kadish here, author of the Earthman Jack Space Saga, and in today's video we are covering one of my all-time favorite topics, which is writer-director Rian Johnson, and whether or not his Star Wars trilogy is actually going forward. And in today's video we actually speculate on what his potential trilogy could be about, where it falls in the Star Wars timeline, and the involvement of certain producers who may or may not affect the outcome of his stories. So if you're a fan or a hater of The Last Jedi, you might find this video particularly interesting. So let's get right to it, and I hope you enjoy it. But let's move on to something that I think is even more interesting than all the comic book news, and that is one of my favorite topics, Rian Johnson and Star Wars. I hate Rian Johnson with 7 passions. I'm sure he's a nice guy in person, but in terms of his handling of the Star Wars franchise, I feel it's been very disrespectful and haphazard. He doesn't really care about the fans so much. And recently, there was an interview he did on a press tour for his new movie Knives Out, where he talked about his Star Wars trilogy. And we're going to get into this right now. So this is over on observer.com. You guys might have seen this. It's been bandied around the internet kind of commentary machine on YouTube. And it says, exclusive, Rian Johnson on the freedom of his Star Wars trilogy and Knives Out. And this is by Brandon Katz. And it starts, getting a movie made is such a laborious process that any film that actually makes it to the screen is a minor miracle. So for Rian Johnson to boast one of Toronto International Film Festival's most anticipated premieres with the murder mystery Knives Out, while also working on a discrete new series of Star Wars movies for Lucasfilm, you know he must possess that it factor Hollywood craves. Well, he certainly possesses something, but I don't know if general audiences crave it. While speaking to Observer ahead of Knives Out debut next month, when we'll have coverage of the film and more from Johnson, he discussed the freedom both projects afford him as a storyteller. Following his work on Star Wars The Last Jedi, Johnson will now create an entirely new story that is disconnected from the main Skywalker saga, thank God.
You mean what he should have done in the first place?
Yeah, probably. I think that the fun and challenging part of it is to dive in, figure out what's exciting, and then figure out what it's going to be, he said. We're doing something that steps beyond the legacy characters. What does that look like? To me, the blue sky element of it is what was most striking about it. I know the way that I'm coming at it, and what's fun about it for everyone in Lucasfilm is figuring out what's the next step. It really makes you think and figure out what the essence of Star Wars is for me, and what it will look like moving forward. Star Wars is arguably the most revered American film franchise in cinematic history, and The Last Jedi reportedly carried a budget of between $200 million and $317 million. Did you guys know the budget for Last Jedi was that big?
No idea.
Tom?
The which one?
The budget for The Last Jedi is reported to be between $200 million and $300 million.
I thought it was less than that. Let me look.
Yeah, I thought it was less too, but this is the price that the article is quoting.
No, that's between 200 and 317 million, according to Google here.
Yeah, that's what's reported here. $300 million for a movie?
IMDb has 317.
Is that the most expensive movie ever made? I've never heard of a movie with
It's got to be close, if not. How much was Titanic, or that was only like 200, right?
200 million. That was the first $200 million.
And then how much was Avatar? Avatar was just about 250 or something like that.
I have no idea.
It was close to 300. That's what I thought. That's what I believe. I may be wrong about that, but yeah, it was really expensive. These are James Cameron.
237 for Avatar. So yeah, that's even more than Avatar. And Avengers had a $356 million budget, I guess.
Oh, wow. Well, $317 million for a movie is crazy. I guess.
Now, Avengers I can understand because of how big the cast is, but yeah.
But I mean, like, people always say, "Oh, Last Jedi made 1.2 billion at the box office" or something like that. But if you go by the rule of thumb that you need to make double your budget back in order to just break even on a Hollywood blockbuster, we're talking, you need to make close to 650 million.
Even with inflation, the first Star Wars was only about $30 or $40 million budget. So it was $11 million, I think, back in '77.
Yeah, but I mean, like, if we're just going with quick math here, that means that the profit on The Last Jedi was only about $700 million, right?
If that. That's the thing is, I don't think we've ever put this in a video, but we've been pretty. I think that the fact I don't think this made much money at all. I really don't, because if the advertising budget alone was probably $300 million.
So that's where we get the rule of thumb of doubling the budget, is because
that's being nice.
Yeah. These companies spend at least that much on the marketing of these movies.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
All right, getting back to the article. Knives Out.
Yeah, I don't know.
Knives Out is an entirely different animal. The original concept. It's not an original concept. He's basically ripping off Agatha Christie. Sadly, a dying breed in Hollywood these days. That is estimated to have cost just $40 million to make. While the disparity in resources certainly carries its own set of challenges, it also represents an opportunity for Johnson to flex his writing muscle. Now, I think that this low budget for Knives Out was very strategic on Johnson's part, because I think he was aware of the backlash for The Last Jedi, and that it's important for his next movie to do well.
Yeah.
And done a big budget movie, there was a chance that it might have failed to make its money back at the box office, which might have affected his ability to make more movies. And so by doing a lower budget film in the $40 million range, which is kind of like where I think his comfort zone has been at for the most part, he was able to basically pre-sell international distribution rights to this movie and recoup all the production costs. So Knives Out has already made over $40 million in terms of pre-sales to international territories for distribution. And that means that no matter how much money it makes now at the box office and home video and streaming and all that stuff, it's pure profit. And so basically this low budget kind of shift was strategic in the sense that he was covering his tail in terms of making sure that any backlash from The Last Jedi wasn't going to harm him. And I don't want to go through the rest of this article because it just talks about Knives Out and it doesn't really say anything very interesting. But the big news here is that, I dropped a video a few days ago where I said that I was pretty confident that his trilogy was still going forward. And there's a lot of rumor out there about how, it's been canceled. A lot of people who are against The Last Jedi and, against how Rian Johnson handled the franchise have been very vocal in their belief that, his trilogy is not moving forward simply because no one's heard anything about it. Like, Bob Iger hasn't mentioned anything about it. But Kathleen Kennedy during Celebration did say that Rian Johnson was involved with Benioff and Weiss, talking to them about their trilogy, which led me to believe that, he was still moving forward with his because they're just coordinating on what each other are doing. And now that he's going out and doing press for Knives Out, a lot of news outlets are asking him about, what's the status on your Star Wars trilogy? And unfortunately for Star Wars fans, it's still going forward. I've always been very vocal about my belief that it was never canceled. It's never been in danger of being canceled, so long as Kathleen Kennedy is the head of Lucasfilm, because she's the one who is in love with Rian Johnson. She has a great working relationship with the guy. And, because Knives Out is going to be a hit in terms of, being profitable, they've got no reason to take him off this thing, and he's got no reason to step away from it. And I think I joked with someone the other day that the only way that Rian Johnson's Star Wars trilogy isn't going forward is if, number one, the Benioff and Weiss trilogy bombs badly. Number two, Kathleen Kennedy gets fired or steps down from Lucasfilm. And number three, I forget what the third one was. But if those two things happen, where the Benioff and Weiss trilogy fail, Bob Iger leaves as well. So if Iger leaves, if Kennedy leaves, and if the Benioff and Weiss trilogy fails to do well at the box office, then I think you'll see Rian Johnson, his stuff canceled, and they look to go in a different direction. But the big thing here is that one of the big arguments that Johnson's defenders have used is that he was too tied into what came before. Like he needs to be able to do his own thing in terms of Star Wars in order to just free him up to let his auteur nature take over. And so what he's been saying here is that he's no longer beholden to any other filmmaker. These are characters he's going to create. These are stories he's going to tell, and he's not weighed down by anything else. And what I think it's looking like, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong on this, from what I'm hearing, the Benioff and Weiss trilogy is definitely set in the Old Republic. I don't know at what point, but it seems like that because of their Game of Thrones background, they want it to be a little bit more like Game of Thronesy, so it's going to be Old Republic type stuff. But Johnson's trilogy is going to be post-sequel trilogy. It's going to be in the future, and he's going to get to basically set the stage for Star Wars going forward. Steve, what do you think of that development there?
Well, to comment on a few things first, Rian Johnson, coming into the Star Wars universe, and they argue he couldn't set his own tone or make his own stuff. Look, you're in Star Wars. That's part of it. Accept it. And, I like Rian. I think I met him once. He was at USC the same time I was. I can't say that I know him. I just kind of, he seemed like a likable enough guy. And you know what? I like Looper and I like Brick, his 2 previous movies. I thought he did a wonderful job. My biggest issue is, you come into this universe and then do something like that. Now, granted, he did get kind of handed some not so good stuff. I mean, I'm sorry. The Abrams movie is still better than his, but there's some stuff in there that's not all that great. It doesn't hold up as well as it did when it first showed. So him getting handed another series, I'm hesitant. I want to see what happens with Knives Out. I don't dislike the guy. I think he can make a good movie. I'm just hesitant to pull him into something that he's already kind of mucked up. It's like, let him take a back seat. As far as Benioff and Weiss, I don't get it about Benioff. I mean, that guy came into all this critical acclaim for what was it, the 25th Hour? It was so wonderful. That was an okay movie. That was it. I don't think he wrote Troy, which was just like, the Trip to the Dentist Office is more fun.
He also wrote X-Men Origins Wolverine.
Oh, he did. Well, see, yeah. It's it's one of those things. I mean, granted, Game of Thrones was great up until this last season, I thought, and I'm hesitant. I'm really worried about them oversaturating with this stuff. I mean, the Han Solo movie, I thought it was okay. I mean, there's some good parts of it. The kid who played him surprised me a bit, but I'm really, really worried about them extending themselves too much. As far as Kathleen Kennedy, it's kind of shocking because seeing how she did so much great work with Steven Spielberg in the past, I thought that was tremendous. I mean, it seemed like a smart movie. I got a guy who's directly tied in. She had a part of the Indiana Jones stuff. You figured she'd make something great happen. I just don't know where they got going. I think they were trying to differentiate themselves so much from Lucas, they end up falling over the opposite direction. So
I think Kathleen Kennedy, her background is being as a logistical producer, where she gets creative people everything they need to get their vision on screen. And I think her biggest issue is that she hired all these auteurs, all these directors and writers who had their own vision instead of a cohesive vision across all these different projects. And because of all these individual visions, the movies are just wildly inconsistent with one another, and Rian Johnson being the biggest one of the bunch. Tom, what do you think of this development? First of all, did you ever think that the Rian Johnson trilogy was actually canceled?
How much time do we got?
We got as much time as you want, buddy.
Oh, good Lord. Okay, I'm going to empathize with Rian Johnson for just one moment here first, to kind of go off of what Steven said. Yeah, this guy was a guy who was put in a position he shouldn't have been put in. Okay. This was like the rookie all of a sudden being the sheriff. You know what I mean? He should have been given some, he should have been doing like Rogue One or something to that effect, not The Last Jedi.
Totally agree.
So I do understand from a point of view that this guy was basically had the world put upon his shoulders in a way, and it just didn't work out for him. Now, a lot of it is his own fault.
Yeah, he also had the problem, like he was writing the script before The Awakens was finished, so he didn't know what the final movie was going to be while he was trying to develop his movie, which was another issue.
And then you had the other side of it where Trevorrow has pretty much confirmed, at least his side of the story, is that his falling out with Disney had very little to do with his movie underperforming so much as he had Luke as a major part of his script and did not agree with Rian Johnson killing Luke. So spoilers for anybody who hasn't seen the movie.
Don't see the movie if you haven't.
Yeah, anyway, so he was like really adamantly pissed about that because come on, let's face it, who gives a shit about Book of Henry? This guy made Jurassic World. Okay, he could pretty much make any movie he wanted for the next couple of years, no matter how bad it was. It doesn't matter. I don't think Disney had a problem with that so much as he was not gelling with Rian, and Rian was Kathy's little butt boy. Okay, let's face it. Rian had his nose so far up her nose. That's how he got a trilogy. Now, I don't have the report in front of me, and I regret not having it, but I think even he has said in a recent interview that he's only signed to direct one film. Okay, so that he's set up a trilogy. He doesn't mean he's necessarily going to film it all. And to go back to what point Matt was making, he keeps saying also that this is a long way off. It's a long way off. He keeps putting that out there that this is going to be a while. Well, Kathleen Kennedy only has 2 years left on her contract.
Well, her contract goes in 2-year increments, but it's automatically renewed pretty much.
Well, yeah, okay. Well, the same time her contract is up is about the same time Bob Iger is set to leave Disney, supposedly. So I have a feeling that those things are going to coincide because I think they're just going to have it to where Kathy's going to quote unquote retire. She's at that age. She'll say, I've been, because I think at that point, I don't know. I could be wrong
with you on this one, man.
I could be wrong, but
like she's going to milk that position for all it's worth. She's not going to retire until 2030 at the very least. Mark my words.
Well, that's only if the hatred of her doesn't get to the people. Because I'll tell you, I don't hate Kathleen Kennedy, but I am convinced completely that the only reason she got the job she did, and she is who she is, she could be anybody. She just happened to work with Steven Spielberg, Robert Zemeckis, and all these great directors, and all this did was put her in a position she shouldn't be in right now.
Well,
and that
she was handpicked by George Lucas.
I know, and that's my point.
She was a friend of his.
Is instead of getting people like Ron Howard and Steven Spielberg and and Robert Zemeckis to direct her Star Wars movies, she got these little auteur directors who were not capable of doing this because they were cheap and she thought they were pliable. And unfortunately, she produced them like she did a Spielberg movie and let Rian Johnson spend over $300 million making The Last Jedi, which was the first mistake, evidently.
Well, I mean, like, so he's made a lot of mistakes, but the thing that people
that's the start of it. Yeah, let's go back through the rest of them. Let's go back.
The thing that you need to remember is that the Disney board of directors and Alan Horn, who's the head of the motion picture division, they're 100% behind her. So even if Bob leaves, whoever replaces Bob Iger, they're going to be 100% behind her too.
They could very well be, and that's if she sticks around.
Like she would have to have 3 major bombs in a row in order to get yanked out of there.
Well, I'll tell you right now, if The Rise of Skywalker doesn't break $1 billion, you're going to start hearing some shit fly. Because I'm predicting right now that it's going to cap out around 850 to 900 million. And that's going to make all of them freak the fuck out because this is something that they don't see coming. And this is why they have not been able to say, I'm sure Bloomberg gave them an opportunity to deny that report they just put out. And that is the most damning thing they could ever have come out right now about this whole Star Wars thing because it confirms everything that the Fandom Menace reporters have been saying all this time. Regardless of all the hyperbole or whatever that's been going on around it, they're still right. Agree with Jeremy at Geeks and Gamers if you want to, or Gary at Nerdwatic if you don't want to, or even us. We were still, for the most part, right. Yeah, Midnight's Edge was much more conservative in our reporting on that. At least I can stand behind that. But the point is, this is not paying off for them. And yeah, they've probably made most of the $4 billion back for the most part. That could be argued. But how much is the rest of this shit going to cost them here from here on out? That's the question. And if the board keeps seeing this as a problem, and what I was getting to is, Rian Johnson is just one of the many problems that are starting to build up on Kathleen Kennedy. Kiri Hart may have taken some of the brunt for that because we were trying to figure
out looks at those problems, though. I honestly don't. I don't think that Alan Horn looks at Rian Johnson and sees a problem. I don't.
Oh, you might be right now, because they're not aware. They're so disconnected from the outside world. But sooner or later, it's going to start showing in the bank statements. Because let's put it this way. We just established that The Last Jedi cost well over $300 million to make. It cost at least that to advertise. And they did not probably make much of a profit on it because the movie barely broke $1 billion or whatever it was, really overall. They don't get to keep all that money. The movie petered out and got killed by Jumanji of all damn things at the box office. So what does that say about the third film that's going to be going up against the next Jumanji? I have a feeling the Rise of Skywalker is not going to bring in the people that they think it. And Solo surprised the hell out of me. I didn't think it was going to hit that hard on Solo. I still don't understand how they made any money on Solo unless they banked on the insurance money, because that's the next part. Lord and Miller, she let them shoot for 70 or 80 days, according to a very reliable source.
It would be interesting to know what the budget overruns on Solo was, like what the original budget was, and then what the cost was after having to basically reshoot 70% of the movie, something like that. But what do you think in terms of do you think Rian Johnson's trilogy is going to go forward, and do you think it's going to happen after the sequel trilogies in terms of where it is in continuity?
That's what I was kind of getting to, is I really don't think it's going to happen. Indiana Jones is one of the only things that she's going to have anything to go forward. Once that's done, I think she really could care less, because that's the only thing she really had any attachment to begin with. She was a producer on those. She had nothing to do with Star Wars. She produced Spielberg stuff. She's produced Zemeckis' stuff, so on. The only Lucas thing I think she's ever been attached to has been Indiana Jones, if I'm not mistaken.
I think you're right about that. I do think that his stuff is going to continue to go forward in the development phase, and I do think that he's been consulting with Benioff and Weiss on their stuff. The big thing here that people have been latching on to is this is an article from Nerdist, which references the article that we just talked about, and that is that his new trilogy won't have any legacy characters, and people are kind of pointing at this and saying this is the culmination of Disney wanting to kill off all the old characters, and basically these legacy characters also include Rey and Kylo Ren, in the sense that Rian Johnson's not going to be using them. But I just want to read through this real quick. Rian Johnson is a contentious name in the Star Wars fandom. For many, his choices in The Last Jedi were controversial, while for others, they were masterful. No matter where you land, it's hard to argue that the man isn't a versatile filmmaker, turning out poignant noirs like Brick, charming capers like The Brothers Bloom, and intelligent sci-fi like Looper. He recently started promotion on his latest film, an Agatha Christie-inspired murder mystery, Knives Out. But he isn't done talking about Star Wars. If you recall, news broke even before The Last Jedi came out that Johnson would work on his own separate trilogy. In an exclusive interview with The Observer, he dropped some of the details about the project, namely that it won't incorporate any familiar legacy characters. So no Luke Skywalker, no Darth Vader, not even Rey, Poe, and Finn, I don't think. But then they quote him from the article, and says, this is the paragraph I wanted to get to. It's interesting to note that he says "we" throughout the quote. He could be referring to Lucasfilm as a whole, but he could also be referring to David Benioff and D.B. Weiss, the Game of Thrones creators, who are also said to be working on a new Star Wars trilogy. Are these projects one and the same? That would track with what Kathleen Kennedy, president of Lucasfilm, said at Star Wars Celebration back in April. And her quote is, as Benioff and Weiss finish Game of Thrones, they're going to segue into Star Wars, she told Entertainment Weekly at the fan event. They're working very closely with Rian.
That's what I was going to say. Yep, I remember this.
It's possible these two announced trilogies are actually one, or that the creators are merely mapping out their separate work together, which I think is most likely the case. Whatever the case, we're excited to see what the Star Wars universe looks like when it moves past extreme familiarity into new territory. All right. So, Tom, you obviously have a lot to say about this, but
I agree with this. Yeah.
Yeah, but I want to throw it to Steve here for a second. So, Steve, we talked a little bit about how disappointing season 8 of Game of Thrones was. Do you think that Benioff and Weiss are looking at Rian Johnson being like, well, we're going to bring him in so like if our stuff's bad, we can just blame it on him again?
That's a possibility. I don't know. I just, at this point, if it's those two are together, or those two groups of people, Johnson with Benioff and Weiss, I think it's it's a little the blind leading the blind. I mean, at their last outings, it's scary. I mean, like, look, you're walking into this new territory, and who knows what they're going to do. I mean, it could be great. I mean, look, I love Rogue One. I thought Gareth Edwards was kind of a lame director when it came down to it. I didn't like his previous outings. It was the first Godzilla movie I wasn't fond of. We talked about that, and I didn't like that other low budget thing he did that I saw. But he pulled it off. So I think that's what kind of hopes they're pinning it on. You got Benioff and Weiss. I think what scares me with those two is if you give them good material, they'll make something good out of it. The first seasons of Game of Thrones, they had George R.R. Martin right there. Wow, look how good those were. And then slowly but surely, he's out of there, and they kind of got worse. And until this final season, it's kind of like they mailed in a check. And I'm just hoping they don't do the same thing here. It's really kind of I'm very kind of scared, very scared with this. As far as I'm mapping it out, if it's two different series and one takes place in the future, the other in Old Republic, that's kind of cool. I don't know why they would work together on that. I mean, other than that, they could basically seed stories in the early part that would be brought to life under Rian Johnson, eons later, which would be kind of cool. I mean, that's a very Babylon 5 type of thing to do. So yeah, if they're working together, I just have to think that it's probably the same series. Someone's being set up as a fall guy, whether it's them or him.
Well, I definitely think that Rian Johnson is consulting with them on their trilogy that's going to be separate from his. Tom, what's your theory on this collaboration?
I think that Exhibit B or C actually would be the whole thing with Rogue One. Gareth Edwards directed it, but what's his face had to come in and save the movie from
Tony Gilroy.
Tony Gilroy, thank you. So I think the reason that might have been so good was him, because I agree with you on most points. As far as I do think they've been working together all this time. I do think that was the plan, because in their little bubble, in their little world, in their little circle, that looks like a dream team to them. And that coincides with Rian Johnson saying he's only going to direct one of the features. At least that's what he signed up for at this point. And Benioff and Weiss aren't directors, so I don't see them directing anything. So it makes complete sense to have Johnson connected to them. And they
are directors, actually. They directed episodes of Game of Thrones.
Yeah, but that doesn't count as a film director. And that could be their next step. You could be right. But I'm going to say something else here. The same thing they did to Game of Thrones was what they did to Dexter. They came in and fucked it up. And here's the thing with those guys, from what I can tell, is that if they don't have something good to work off of, they're screwed. They're like, a fart in the wind. But now Johnson, though, I have seen Looper. I didn't like the movie as much as you guys, but I do give it credit for being an original idea, and I like the concept. Now, I hope that wasn't Rian Johnson's first draft like The Last Jedi was. That's the problem right there is, this guy's given plenty of time now. Okay, I'm going to again give this guy one more shot. If he just keep his mouth shut and quit being a jerk to the fans, if he does get lucky enough to get behind that camera and direct one of these things, even if it does happen to be a Benioff and Weiss, written film, and that's the whole point, is that they came up with the trilogy and he directs the first one and they work together on it or whatever. If you're right, Matt, that could be too. I don't know. I don't think so. I think in their little bubble, they see it better as they're helping him write a movie trilogy, and there's overseeing the entire trilogy. He's just going to direct the first one like a television show. You know what I mean? Like, he developed the concept with them. He directs the first episode and then gives the rest to whoever comes in after that. That could very well be the situation, because that's the other thing with these young guys. And that's a stupid thing about Kathleen Kennedy doing this is, yeah, these young guys want to make a Star Wars movie, but they don't want to make 3 of them. They don't want to tie themselves down for 8 years to a trilogy like JJ did.
Hey, thanks for checking out this video. I hope you got a lot out of it. And remember, if you want to support the channel, please check us out on the socials. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Matthew Kadish. You can also find our discussion group over on Facebook at eggfbgroup.com. That's eggfbgroup.com. Takes you right to our Facebook discussion group. And if you'd like to help support the channel, check out my books over on Amazon.com. You can find them by going to kadishbooks.com. That's KADISH books.com. And as always, subscribe to the channel and hit that bell icon so you're notified every time we upload a new video for more movie, TV, and entertainment news and analysis. This is Matthew Kadish. I'll catch you guys later.